We can get started.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Today is Thursday, May the 30th, 2024. Welcome to PAYCO's Legal Insights session. Before we launch into our presentation, I just wanted to give a couple of quick announcements. Coming up on June 18th, we will have our installation of new officers. Yes, elections are going to take place before that happens, and you will be getting email communications about that. And the location is yet to be determined. On June the 20th, we will welcome Dean Borger of Borger Investigative Services. He will talk to us about the use of investigators in a workers' comp claim. And then our next Legal Insights session is on Thursday, June the 27th, and we will welcome attorney Allison Harrison, who will discuss the challenges in the law for the LGBTQ community. So those events are up on the website on the events calendar, and you can certainly register for any of them at any time you'd like. We will go ahead and launch right in. Today, we are very pleased to have with us Karen Mansfield. Karen is a paralegal in Illinois. She is in Springfield, Illinois, right?
Yes.
Yes. Karen has been, she has lots of experience as a paralegal. She's been doing this for a very long time. Her practice is focused on general civil law, specializing in labor and employment and litigation. She has a certificate in paralegal studies from the American Institute for Paralegal Studies and holds the credential of a certified legal assistant, which is now a certified paralegal. And she is also a member of the Illinois Paralegal Association. She's an honorary board member, former president, vice president, secretary, and treasurer. She is active with the National Federation of Paralegal Associations, co-chair of the NFPA Ethics Board, and the National Association of Legal Assistants. Karen, thank you so much for joining us today and talking to us about ethics.
Well, I appreciate you asking me to be here. And as you can tell, I am a big proponent of being a member of an association. No matter what your career path, you should be a member of the professional association for your career path. So I kind of jumped on the bandwagon there. Today, we're going to hit a lot of topics within the ethics time frame or framework. And my screen's not progressing. There we go. Okay. You know, I've been around for a long time, so I put the screen up just because the work that paralegals do has changed a lot over the years because the law has changed from very, and I don't want to say simple, but it was a much simpler time frame 50 years ago than it is nowadays with all the things that are going on in the field of law and companion areas. So that's why that screen is there. We're going to talk about a lot of things today. We're going to talk about types of paralegals, a little bit about licensing and regulation. We're going to define a paralegal. We're going to talk a little bit about AI and paralegals and ethics. Why are ethics important? And I want you to know who you are, certificated, certified, that sort of thing. The ABA model rules, voluntary ethical codes, social media, unauthorized practice of law. And if we have time, we'll recap it and we'll talk about ripped from the headlines, bad paralegals. So that's why the title of this presentation is Ethics and the Kitchen Sink, because I'm throwing it all in for you today. Okay, so there are types of paralegals. And in the past, there were generally, there was the traditional paralegal working in an environment directly under the supervision of an attorney. And then paralegals started freelancing. And this has been maybe 20, 30 years more. 30 years ago, there weren't a lot of people that were freelancing. Nowadays, quite a few are. the independent paralegal is not allowed in most states because working without the supervision of an attorney is the unauthorized practice of law. But with the advent of licensing and regulation, we now have in Washington State the limited licensed legal technicians, and that program is, there are still triple LTs practicing, but that program is really kind of sunset, and I think they're working on bringing it back. In Utah, there are licensed paralegal practitioners. In California, Arizona, Nevada, Florida, there are legal document preparers. In Minnesota, and there's the licensed or the legal paraprofessional, but they're still working under the supervision of an attorney. Oregon licensed paralegals, there were 10 people just admitted to the bar in like March, I think. And there we go. First licensed paralegals in Oregon were sworn in March 30th. So congratulations to them. In Minnesota, they're a paraprofessional project is that's what it is. It's a project, and they're going to see how it works out. And in a lot of respects, when what we're seeing is paralegals in these cases are working in landlord-tenant areas or family law. They're not doing, they're not practicing in a lot of areas. So we're going to be following that. And New Hampshire, well, I'm getting ahead of myself. Arizona has the limited licensed legal practitioner, and that's changed. And this is, you know, just some information about what they can do. And in almost every respect, the states have prepared requirements on how these people can advertise, who they can represent, what the limits of the representation are. So if you want to look these up, you know where to start. And this is New Hampshire. I couldn't really find much on this, and it's a pilot program as well. And again, they're still going to be acting under the supervision of an attorney. So, and one of the requirements that is that their pleadings have to state that. So for each state, you need to see what the requirements are with respect to representation, contracts, advertising, things like that. Okay, defining a paralegal. There have been for several years now official definitions of paralegals. And here is the NFPA definition. And this is, I think from 2020 is when they changed it, and they dropped legal assistant from that definition. So you can see this, you can see how similar it is to the NALA and the ABA definitions. Both of them also dropped legal assistant. So now you're seeing definitions that are specifically, or where we're being specifically called paralegals. Now, AI, boy, that's a big topic of conversation nowadays. And what I find really interesting, this is not really us, but was this big case, and the attorneys got in a lot of trouble because they used AI to create their briefs to the court. And the court was like, come on, basically they were like, you know, you've submitted a brief, and not only are your citations inaccurate, they're non-existent. So there were sanctions, and the attorneys signed an affidavit that, you know, their briefs were accurate. So that was a big issue too. So this is where paralegals can really shine when they're helping attorneys, is checking all the cites in a brief before it goes to the court and making sure that the cites are correct. I'm sure most of you do this already just as a matter of course, but especially nowadays where they're using AI, you're making sure that the citation actually exists and it references the case. because we're finding out that AI just will make up stuff, so you really have to be careful about that. And here is another one, two cases. One of was in Missouri, and I put this in because I love the comment. We regret that the appellant has given us our first opportunity to consider the impact of fictitious cases being submitted to our court, an issue which has gained national attention in the rising ability of generative AI. So again, a paralegal would have caught that. So in some cases, and the Smith versus Farwell case, I think this counsel, he was, yeah, I did it, and they still were like, no, this is bad, and you just can't do it. But I think it's interesting that somebody is not checking this information, and so when we do our jobs and do them well, we're checking and making sure that the information is correct. And some courts now are actually requiring that if a brief is submitted to the court, a statement must accompany it that if AI is used, and basically outline that it's been reviewed and all the citations are correct. So you check your court to see if that statement is required, because I think several states are requiring that nowadays. And will AI replace paralegals? I don't think so. We're necessary. We, here, the basics, we'll know how to use AI, well, the attorneys may not. We will check the citations and the research because we just already do that. And we'll also offer our interpersonal skills and insights that AI will not have when we are working with clients and working on cases. You just can't replace that human touch. AI will be able to do some of the more burdensome tasks immediately, incredibly, but we will still be needed. Now, why are ethics important? Okay. For a lot of reasons, and we'll hit on them today. But one reason is the client and the attorney, they have to have total confidence in you. They have to understand and know that, one, whatever is said within the confines of the office will stay there, that the work you're doing is as high a quality as you can get it. And that means you're very conscientious and you're checking your work and using all the technology available to you to help you do quality work. And remembering that ethics are becoming more complex today because of all the technology. And we'll talk a little bit about this. But there are ethical standards for attorneys, and an ethical rule is a minimum standard of conduct. And if an attorney does something bad, they can be disbarred. If we do something bad, we're not going to be disbarred. But if we do something bad, the attorneys we work for can suffer consequences because they are supervising us and they're responsible. So we have to be careful. So we also follow their model code of ethics and professional responsibility, and which is, the ABA has that. Most states have their own codes as well. And even though those rules don't directly apply to paralegals, as I said, attorneys can be disciplined for acts of their staff members, which, and that goes from the bottom up, everybody in the office goes under the umbrella of the attorney. An attorney can't not avoid ethical rules by delegating a task to a staff member. And we'll talk about that a little later on when we get to the rip from the headlines, where, attorney can't tell you to do something that he knows he cannot do. And you could get in trouble as well. So you have to be ready to say no. And that includes when an attorney wants you to notarize a document and the person is not present, and it's an affidavit, then you have to say no, and then if you want to do remote, that's available nowadays in a lot of states. That may be a possibility, but if you know that you're being asked to do something wrong, you have to be ready to say no. And the paralegal can be held accountable by an attorney for violating the law. And a paralegal can also be criminally charged with the unauthorized practice of law and pay civil damages. So we'll get to that in a little bit. But I want you to know who you are. We're going to talk more about attorneys and their code of ethics in a minute, but I want you to always be aware of if you're certified or certificated. Because I see on listservs nowadays that paralegals are saying, I'm an ABA certified paralegal. And I'm always like, oh, no, you're not. The ABA does not certify paralegals. If you've graduated from a program, you're a certificated paralegal, most likely. You'd have to ask the program. If you're certified, that means you have passed a competency exam from NALA or something like that. And here's the article where the woman talks, the attorney talks about what is a ABA certification or not. So the process for ABA approval applies only to the program itself, not to the individuals who graduate from it. So be aware that what you are, if you're certified, I have CP after my name, so that means I took the NALA competency examination. You might have RP, you might have OBSA after your name, which means you're certified because in Ohio you've taken the a written exam and passed it. So I'm getting off my box for that issue. The ABA model rules, we'll talk a little bit about them because again, they're written for attorneys, but paralegals follow them. So we want to help attorneys provide competent representation. And that means we need to be competent and understand rules. We need to understand procedures. We need to understand technology. And we also need to understand timelines so we can help our attorneys with that. I don't know about you, but I remind my attorney when he needs to return calls. Because sometimes some attorneys are not prompt in returning calls. And if I were a client, I don't want to have to call 10 times to get a call back. If the attorney says they're going to do something and they haven't done it for a couple months, then I think you need to be helping them act with reasonable diligence and promptness in representing a client. Now, model rule 1.4 is, let me see if I can read my presentation. Communications. Okay, you're gonna help communicate with the client occasionally, and when the client asks you questions about the case, generally you're going to relay information from the attorney because you're not going to be giving legal advice. So you have to be very careful about that. Confidentiality. Again, everything you learn in the office stays in the office. It's kind of like that Las Vegas thing, everything that goes on in Las Vegas stays in Las Vegas. In the office, no matter what kind of office you're in, if you learn information about a client, you're not going to share it with anybody, not your husband, not your partner, nobody. So you're going to help the attorney keep that confidence. Conflict of interest. I include this. The attorneys have to worry about that, but also I live in a small community. Actually, I live outside a small community of like 600 people, and we have clients come in and I might know them, or they might be wanting to sue their employer. And in one instance, my sister and my sister-in-law both work for the Illinois State Police. So, and my sister-in-law was in labor relations. So when someone came in, I had to make sure that the attorney remind him that you know, if we had a potential client who had been employed by the Illinois State Police, that he was aware that there might be a conflict. So not only do lawyers have the responsibility to check for a conflict of interest, we also have to inform the attorneys we work for of the possibility. I'm going to skip over this. And I include safekeeping of property because a lot of times we're working in small offices and we're responsible for the trust account. And if you become aware of issues with the trust account, you need to report it. That's one of the big things that lawyers get in trouble for, is using client money for their own personal reasons. And so not only do attorneys have to safekeep property for their clients, if we're aware of issues, we need to report that. Maybe if you're in a large firm, you report it up. You may not be aware of it. You may also be responsible for helping keep property that the client has brought in, or maybe you're holding a boat or something like that. So you're responsible for making sure that the storage is being paid on property. So there are lots of different things that can come into safekeeping property. We're just going to skip that. You can read this later. And that one, trial publicity. I don't know how many of you have been asked by your friends, hey, I saw in the paper that you're representing such and such. And my response is like, really? I didn't see that. And I don't admit that we represent anybody. It is up to the client to let people know if we're representing them. And even if the newspapers say something, you know, they get a lot of things wrong. You need to be aware that when there are issues, you may have a department in your firm that handles commenting on cases. So in any issues like that would be referred to that department in your firm, or if somebody says something like that to you, you just say, oh, I don't know, and move on. Here we go. The lawyers have direct supervisory authority over a non-lawyer, and they're responsible for the conduct. So voluntary ethical codes, that's because we're members of professional associations, and I've included the Illinois Paralegal Association because I'm a member of it and was kind of helped a little bit with when we crafted our code of ethics. But national associations and local associations often have created voluntary ethical codes, and that includes NFPA, NALA, NALS, which is formerly National Association of Legal Secretaries, Illinois Paralegal Associations. I saw that I lost some of my information. This particular association in Ohio has rules, a code of ethics. So you can go to the website and see that. Let me get to my. So all of these are online. You know, one thing about being in the paralegal profession nowadays is we have so much information available at our fingertips. And all of this can pop up immediately for you to take a look at. So use it, you know, if you have questions. When you're a credentialed paralegal, whether it's through the National Association of Legal Assistants or NFPA, you are required to adhere to the code of ethics of that particular organization. And also you're required to have continuing legal education in order to maintain your credential. So you have to state you're going to follow those code of ethics, and then you're also going to maintain your credential by continuing to learn. Now, these are some of the rules from NFPA, from the code, and it's interesting that some of them mirror those of attorneys. And we find that we're doing already what the attorneys are doing. So you can see these again, they're online, and we're going to talk about some of these as we go through. NALA also has canons for their code of ethics. And again, they are similar to what we've seen with NFPA. And I have included the IPA Code of Ethics because like NFPA, there's a commentary. So if you're not quite sure about the rule, you can read what the people who crafted the rules are talking about. And I like this one because they include Missouri versus Jenkins, which was one of the first cases that allowed for the recovery of paralegal fees. And back then it was like $50 an hour, but we still did that Skippy dance when that came out, because it was like, yes, they're understanding what we're doing here. The courts are. So nowadays it's just, your fees are included in a fee petition, and it's not a big deal. Okay, billable time. For paralegals who are required to bill their time, you need to do this as you're doing the work, not at the end of the day, not on Friday, not on the last day of the month. You have to make sure it's accurate and you keep up with it. So some of your billing programs actually have like timekeepers. So when you start on a project, you can start your timer, and then when you're done, you can stop it, and it's there for you. I cannot use that because I just get interrupted too many times during the workout. Angela's like, "Oh yeah." So you're working on this, and you're finding out that it's just not going to work for you. What are your scope of duties? Well, we cannot give legal advice. We know that. We cannot misrepresent our status. And we'll see later on where somebody's done that. We cannot represent clients in court. And again, we'll see where bad paralegals done that. We can represent clients in certain administrative proceedings, or if you're in these certain states where you've been licensed to do so. And I have here, you cannot perform legal analysis. Well, you can do legal research and analyze the information for the attorneys in the office, but it is up to them to digest the information and convey it to the client. So you can perform legal analysis in a way, but you're not going to be sharing that directly with the client. And you can't accept a case, set a fee, or split fees with an attorney. For a few years back, there was the big deal about Erin Brockovich. She got a big bonus at the end of working on the case, and that's acceptable. Or paralegals can be awarded bonuses. However, they cannot. There were some people that said, she did most of the work on that case and brought it to the attorney. Well, they can't split fees with her. Now, what about communications? We're always talking, and hopefully you're in a position where you're communicating with clients, because it's just very interesting. But then you're also communicating with non-clients, and that's not always just potential witnesses. That could be court personnel, that could be just places you're trying to gather information from. And so you're always going to be respectful and courteous. And I know sometimes, especially since COVID, when all calls seem to be forwarded to some other machine, it's because the person is working remotely, and they'll get back to you eventually. It can be really frustrating, but you're always going to be respectful and courteous, because you don't know what's going on their end of the line. And sometimes, it's funny sometimes when you actually ask that question, they'll be like, "Oh, my car broke down today," or I have a child in the hospital. Just different things are going on in their life. So, take a step back and just be kind with people. Diligence. Again, this is where we make sure and help our attorneys represent their clients in a reasonable time frame. So that means rather than working at a snail's pace, You're going to help them remember that there's work to be done, and you're going to get your assignments done promptly, because we know it's not just you getting the work done, it's fitting your work into the attorney's schedule for when they have time to review it. And so that's why you need to do your work promptly and get it shared to the attorney so they can take a look at it. Confidentiality, and I had to share this with you. I came across this little seal, and this, reminds me that when we are working, we are not sharing information, and sometimes the client's mom will call, or sibling or whatever, and we're just not going to even sometimes admit we know who they're talking about. So that's kind of going out on a limb, but you know what I mean. We're keeping the information in the office. Attorney-client privilege does extend to paralegals in certain respects. The work product doctrine protects work that was prepared by the attorney and paralegal in litigation. And a friend that I a lot of times do these presentations with, in her memos to the attorneys, that when she does work, she includes in the memo that the memo was prepared in anticipation of litigation, so then it's protected from disclosure and discovery. Now, when is privilege waived? And that depends. It's only the client that's waiving privilege, so you have to be aware of that. And then confidentiality with this work from home situation, and we'll talk more about that in a little bit, but boy, if you have Siri or Alexa listening in the background for you to tell it to turn up the heat or turn on the music, it's also listening when you're having conversations with clients or with the attorneys. So you have to be careful with that. And who knows where the information goes? It's out in the ether somewhere, but you just have to be aware of these things. A conflict of interest, I've talked a little bit about this already. And for those of you who have ethical issues, you can look at malpractice insurer websites, because sometimes they have information about ethics for lawyers and paralegals. But one thing, if you're switching positions, going to a different job, and you're going to be working in a firm that might have been the opposing counsel in a case that your current firm is working on as the primary counsel, you need to inform your new firm, the opposing counsel, that they have to put up an ethical wall or Chinese wall, so that you cannot see any of that information. You cannot talk about it with them, because that would not be ethical. Unauthorized practice of law. We could already talk about that. So I'll move on. What if you work without attorney supervision? Well, in certain states, you can do that. Can you explain policies and procedures? Yes, you can do that, because that's, in writing, and as long as you're not explaining how they're applied. If you're just saying, it's on the website, go look at the website, you're not explaining how a statute applies to a case, you don't want to be doing that. The legal document preparers, they cannot tell you which form to select. They can help you prepare a document, but they cannot say, oh no, you shouldn't be using this form, you should use a different one. They have certain requirements on what they can do as well. Okay, ethics. And let me get to that screen. Working remotely. Okie doke. There are so many issues in working remotely, and I saw an opinion from, I think it was Pennsylvania recently, where it literally went through and listed all the things a law firm should do when it had staff working remotely. It talked about encryption and VPNs and all different kinds of things, because there are so many ways to relay information nowadays, and who is listening to it. So that could be, telephone conversations, your Zoom or WebEx conferences can be an issue, depending on where you're located, or if you're in a public space, who can overhear what you're talking about. If you're working from home, are you allowed to print documents at home? Because who might see them there? You're not in a secure environment, and the dog ate it. Who could see that? The vet, maybe. Emails, there are all different kinds of security that can be used, and encryptions. Connectivity can be an issue. I live in the country. I have a hotspot, and it kind of wobbles a lot. So you have to be careful about that. You also have to be careful with your flash drives, your laptops, your phones, because when you're traveling or moving from place to place, if you're starting in Illinois and you're gone to Ohio for the day and you're taking everything with you, can someone access your laptop or your flash drive or your phone? What if you lose it? What's going to happen? Again, Alexis is listening. In Starbucks, who's listening when you're sitting there drinking your coffee and working for a while? You have to be concerned about these things. Okay, you're going to disclose your status to everyone all the time. And that's another thing I harp on, because when you call someone and you say, I'm from this law office, they assume almost automatically that you're an attorney. So you have to just kind of run into that. Hi, I'm Karen Mansfield. I'm a paralegal and I work for Baker and Krajewski, so that they know right off the bat you're a paralegal. And if you are talking with someone that you talk with all the time and they know you're a paralegal, you don't have to do that every time. But for most people, you need to disclose your status so that they do not understand or think that you're a lawyer. Now, nearly every state has criminal statutes that keep non-lawyers from practicing law, and there can be criminal sanctions when those people are discovered. So I'm kind of jumping around a little bit. Again, going back to technology, there are all kinds of issues, so you have to be careful. And again, ethical considerations when redacting documents. Back in the olden days, a Sharpie was used a lot of times, and you could sometimes even see through a Sharpie. So most of us would just scan the document, so then we knew that it was black and couldn't be read. So nowadays, sometimes you can unredact, and you want to make sure that whatever you're sending cannot be unredacted. And then this shows how old I am, but be careful faxing, because sometimes confidential information can get out inadvertently when a fax is sent to the wrong number. Years and years ago, I remember the story about the staff person who sent a trial strategy inadvertently to opposing counsel. Big boo-boo. So you have to be careful. Be careful when you're emailing and you hit reply all. Just don't do it. And I've been more careful lately. I've been checking my emails before I send them, because sometimes people change their emails and they're going to the wrong place. So you have to be careful with that all the time. And then I think most of us, we have learned that plagiarism is the sincerest form of flattery in the legal profession, and we copy and paste so many things that you have to be careful and make sure that your documents do not include names from a prior case, that the case numbers are correct, and then again with our citations, that everything is accurate. Social media. This is a big thing nowadays. Most people are on Facebook. The question is, do you friend people that you have come to know through your work? I don't friend clients. I don't talk about work on Facebook. It is solely for personal information for me. I don't create arguments on Facebook or things like that. So it is up to you. Some firms will have restrictions on whether you can be on Facebook or what you can put on Facebook. So you need to be aware, you know, this is usually in the really big firms. If you want to connect professionally, use LinkedIn. That's a great way to connect with people. And I'm finding that I think I'm using my older presentation, because Twitter is now kind of like the artist formerly known as Prince. Now Twitter is known as X. But there's all different kinds of social media out there. I didn't even put the ones that you know, you have Tinder and all those dating sites. You need to be aware of these, because in certain areas of law, it may become part of what you have to do in discovery to recover information from all these different types of social media. So again, you know, be careful in what you're using. Can you use social media to research jurors during the jury selection process? And is it a protected communication? Is it a prohibited communication? And can you use social media to impeach a witness? Well, there would be some who would say nowadays it is a lawyer's responsibility to make sure that social media is used to research jurors, because by doing so, you're going to see if they have their blogs that might relate to the subject matter of the trial or the case. You might read their postings on Facebook, find out if they filed bankruptcy, things like that. So yes, you're not only checking their backgrounds, but you're using social media to see if the information that they have shared on social media is somehow contrary to the case. And what we also want to understand is that we can use the information we find on social media to impeach a witness. And I remember hearing years ago about the story about the gentleman who, we don't do workers' comp in our office, but the gentleman who was on workers' comp and had some real serious back issues. And he posted on Facebook he was water skiing in Missouri or something like that. So needless to say, that affected the outcome of his case. So be careful what you post. May come back to haunt you. So how do you avoid the unauthorized practice of law? Well, you're always going to have your work approved by a supervising attorney. If you're working in the area of law, you know, if you're not a triple LT or something like that, you're never going to give legal advice. You're not going to say, I think, or you should do. And clients will ask you, you know, maybe you're working on discovery and they'll be like, what do you think? You know, do we have a great case here or what? And you're going to be like, you know what? I think I'll set up a time for you to talk with the attorney and he can tell you what his opinions are. Because you may have found out things in discovery that you're going to have to share with the attorney, and you know, it might not be helpful for your client. And you're also going to share with the attorney if the client says, what do you want me to say? Or they'll say what I told them to say. You know, the attorney needs to be aware of it when issues like that come up. So again, you're always going to clearly identify yourself as a paralegal, never accepting a case or a legal fee, and you're not going to appear in court unless you're authorized to do so by some type of agency. You know, IRS, you might be a registered agent, but you're not going to represent client unless you're allowed to do so. With client communications, it's best if you do not take calls when you're meeting with a client. Just so you're not, you know, going to say something that the client you're sitting with in your office might understand what you're talking about. You're not going to share facts of a case with anybody outside the office. You just don't do that. And you have to be careful when you're talking about cases in public places, because sometimes, you know, here in my office, we just walk out the door and we're in our car. But if you're in Chicago or a big city, you know, you're in the elevator, you're on the train, you're sitting in restaurants, and you're talking about the case with your coworker who is around you, who can hear what you're saying. So you have to be aware of your surroundings.
It is paralegal specific. So.
Somebody have a question? Okay, So what do you do if you have an ethics question? Well, if you're in a large enough office, you talk with the supervising attorney, the firm ethics committee, or paralegal.
Anderson reporting is there, which is weird, but it is recorded.
That's the.
Am I?
So you can get.
Team, please check your mics. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, there we go. Okay. And again, check ethics areas on websites with liability insurers. Your resources are also NFPA, NALA, the ABA, the American Bar Association has a Center for Professional Responsibility, because, sometimes you have to check outside the office because when there's an issue with ethics involving the attorney. So you have to be aware, where can I go to find answers? So you're going to have professional and personal integrity, which means you're not going to violate the rules. You're not going to engage in any conduct that makes you appear to be dishonest or involving dishonesty, fraud, deceit, or misrepresentation. Basically, you're going to rise above. And now I want to talk to you a little bit about people who have done the opposite of what we've talked about today. And I've included this one case, and this goes back to 2018, where a Cleveland lawyer was incredibly awful to his paralegal. And the paralegal recorded conversations of her boss calling her names and talking about things, and the attorney was suspended because of his behavior. So attorneys can also get in trouble for what they do to their staff. And a Bronx district attorney paralegal was arrested for heroin possession. And that was really not very smart, because I think she was actually carrying the heroin and crack when she was going through security, going on her way to work. So she got in trouble for that. And here, this hits close to home because a federal judge here in Springfield, district court judge, engaged in ex parte communications with the paralegal in the district court office. So that brought up all kinds of issues with what could be, what the court might have to do to fix this problem. There was also the issue of attorneys who directed their paralegal to friend a person on Facebook, and the paralegal didn't reveal that she worked for the attorneys that were investigating a party. So that was a bad thing. Again, if you know that the attorney is telling you to do something wrong, don't do it. Okay, this was a big thing, and this goes way back. In Connecticut, there was an attorney who worked in a large law office, and he was this gentleman. He represented himself as an attorney for several years. He took depositions. He did all kinds of things, and nobody ever checked. They just let him keep going. And this went on for several years. And then it affected so many cases, they had to go back and take a look at them. There was an attorney and a paralegal that they were bribing a court worker to get clients. Really? Then in Knoxville, Tennessee, there was a paralegal who was ripping off people that he was soliciting. There was a paralegal that was accused of misconduct in the Bell South case. And this is my personal favorite. The overworked paralegal went to jail because he forged judges' signatures. And you can look all these on the internet. They should come up if you Google them. But this particular paralegal just was overworked, thought he was overworked, and he just, rather than sending out something to a judge to get it signed, he would just sign it. Okay, get that done. So So these are just things I want you to be aware of that, and this happens in all kinds of professions. There are people that do things in their professions that are against the law, or but in our profession, it can have some serious consequences. This paralegal was accused of defrauding clients of immigration firms. It was more than one firm, so they finally caught up with her. San Diego FBI paralegal. You'd think, of all places, FBI, the lady embezzled $160,000. And I think this New York paralegal, I think he might be the same guy we already saw. I don't think this is showing up on this presentation, is there were a couple instances in Ohio. One was where a lady was trying to represent herself, and she was fined $5,000 by I think it was the Ohio Supreme Court. And we have the paralegal who was charged with jury tampering because she was identifying cooperating witnesses. And I don't know that people were killed, but that was a serious misjudgment on her part. Here was one in 2019, a personal injury firm had an issue where they sent paralegals undercover as a potential client to get forensic information. Here for you notaries, this woman in Chicago in I think it was 2020, said that a notary forged her signature on documents. So again, that, nowadays in Illinois, notaries have a journal, and you have them sign their name in the journal too. So you wouldn't have an issue like this particular case where you would have their identification and their signature to show that they appeared before you. But I don't know what happened with that case. Paralegal in the West, she was tipping off the drug cartel about issues. So I think they were threatening her family members. Very much an issue. And if you're working in that kind of office environment, hopefully you have some protection from the bad people. And I think there was another Ohio case. There was a case in a senior paralegal was engaged in the unauthorized practice of law, and that was in, I think, North Carolina. And this particular lady had represented herself said she was actually a lawyer, and they finally caught up with her. So we've talked about a lot today. I brought these little tidbits from the news just to show you where, oops, sorry. My husband. There are a lot of areas where people can get in trouble, where paralegals can get in trouble. And so that's why we have to be careful. And we have to make sure that unless we're authorized to do so, whether you're in Oregon or Washington, Minnesota, New Hampshire, that there's no unauthorized practice of law, that we're always going to exercise the highest level of competence, which means, no matter what other people around you are doing, you're going to be doing your best. You're going to always identify yourself as a paralegal, and you're going to keep everything confidential, no matter what. So I think the presentation that Angela has is slightly different for some reason. When in my OneDrive, this is what came up. So what you have and what she can distribute to you all is slightly different, but it is the same on all the high points. I think just I had a couple more ripped from the headlines issues. But I want to thank you for asking me to attend, and I want to thank all of you for attending today. And do you have any questions?
Questions, anyone? Comments? Horror stories, nightmares?
Well, and I think part of it too, is, many of us might have the horror stories relating to being a notary, where people will call and say, I've signed this and I'm sending it to you now. Will you notarize it? And you're like, no, absolutely not. You have to come in, with the remote notarization, things have changed somewhat, but for a long time, people mostly had to appear in person. So.
Yeah, I recently had a family member ask me, hey, dad wants to buy this truck from so-and-so. She's disabled and can't get to a bank to have the title notarized. Would you notarize her signature? And she could not understand why I wouldn't do it. It's somebody I don't know. I wasn't witnessing her signature. I had no idea whether it was legitimate. And I said, absolutely not without witnessing her signature in person. But it's for dad. Well, yeah, okay, that's great. But I can't do that.
Right. Yeah. And Jimmy was saying that, when we were talking about, a client asks for your opinion, then you say, let me check with the attorney, and you can relay information. Well, Mr. Such and such or Miss Such and such says that your case is, and then you can explain whatever the attorney has told you, but you're not giving your own opinion to the client. So that's definitely the way to handle that. Or you just set up a conference for the client to talk to the attorney so they can explain everything. Okay, I'm not seeing any more comments. Okay, and there's an online notary, a go-to online notary. So, and some states you have to check on that, because I think most states are allowing online notaries, but not all of them yet. So remote.
Yeah.
It's coming up.
Okay. Well, Karen, thank you so much for your time and your expertise. We appreciate your joining us today and sharing everything ethics. We enjoyed your presentation. It was very enlightening, very informative. And we appreciate your being here with us very much. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. We'll be sending out the CLE certificate and Karen's presentation in the next couple of days for those of you who attended. And don't forget to go to the website and register for the upcoming presentations. And we will talk to you later. Have a great day, everyone.
Okay. Thanks. Bye-bye. Thanks again, Angela, for asking.
Oh, thank you so much for bailing me out.
You're fine. Always available to talk about things like this. And I can also talk about discovery and litigation a little bit. So.
Okay,
We're
okay, definitely something to keep in mind. Well,
Okay.
thanks so much. Have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.